The recording chamber was cold and sterile. Commander Vex Wrath of the Corvani Imperial Fleet sat across from the human journalist, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he tried to gather his thoughts. The war had ended 3 standard cycles ago, but the memories remained fresh in his mind like open wounds that refused to heal. "You want to know what disturbed us most about fighting humans?" Vexroth asked, his translator unit humming softly as it converted his words. It was not their weapons. It was not their tactics. It was the laughter. The journalist leaned forward, her recording device floating between them. She had heard similar accounts from dozens of alien veterans, but each story added a new layer of horror to the collective memory of the galactic war. Vex Wrath closed his secondary eyes and began to speak. The first time he encountered humans in combat was on the mining world of Keth 4. His battalion had cornered a small group of human soldiers in a narrow canyon. There were perhaps 30 of them against his 300 warriors. By all military calculations, the humans should have surrendered or been eliminated within minutes. Instead, something impossible happened. As his troops advanced with plasma rifles raised, one of the human soldiers began to laugh. It was not a nervous laugh or a cry of madness. It was genuine amusement, as if the human found the entire situation somehow funny. Other humans joined in, their strange barking sounds echoing off the canyon walls. Vexroth remembered freezing in place. In Corvani culture, facing death was met with solemn acceptance. Warriors prepared their minds for the eternal void. They did not laugh. They did not smile. The concept was alien to every species he had ever encountered in 200 years of service. "They were joking with each other," Vexrath said, his voice dropping low, making comments about the situation. One of them said something like, "Well, this is a fine mess you got us into, Jenkins," and then they all laughed again. The battle that followed defied every tactical prediction. The laughing humans fought with a ferocity that seemed to increase with each fallen comrade. When one of them was wounded, the others did not despair. They made dark jokes about it. When their ammunition ran low, they improvised weapons from rocks and debris while cracking smiles. Vexroth lost 160 warriors that day. The humans lost 12. The journalist asked if this was an isolated incident. "No," Vexroth replied flatly. "It was every encounter. Every single one." In another part of the galaxy, a Theshan veteran named Koramnil shared her own memories with a different researcher. The Theshans were known throughout the cosmos as one of the most fearless warrior races. They had conquered 12 star systems before encountering humanity. They had never known defeat. Koramel described the siege of Outpost 7, a human military installation that her fleet had surrounded for 40 standard days. The humans were outnumbered 50 to 1. Their supplies were running out. Their reinforcements were months away. Logic dictated they would eventually break down psychologically and surrender. Instead, the humans began broadcasting music. It was the strangest sound, Koramel said, her mandibles clicking in what passed for discomfort among her species. Rhythmic, energetic. They were playing it at maximum volume so we could hear it in our ships. When the Theshans finally breached the outer walls, they expected to find desperate, broken defenders clinging to their last moments of life. What they found was a group of humans singing along to their music while setting up defensive positions. Some of them were dancing between taking shots at the advancing Theshan troops. One human sergeant had fashioned a makeshift speaker system from damaged equipment and was serving as what the humans called a DJ. He took requests from his fellow soldiers while simultaneously providing covering fire with his other hand. They were having what they call a party, Koramel said, her voice carrying notes of something between horror and grudging respect. In the middle of a siege, in the middle of dying. They were celebrating. The Theshans eventually took the outpost, but at a cost of over 10,000 warriors. Fewer than 80 humans had held them at bay for nearly 2 standard months. When the last defenders fell, they were still smiling. A Dravok psychologist named Essenter had dedicated his career to studying this phenomenon after the war ended. He had interviewed hundreds of human combat veterans, trying to understand what made them so different from every other species in the known galaxy. Their psychology is fundamentally unique, Essender explained to a gathering of galactic scientists. Most sentient species respond to extreme stress with fear, despair, or at best, grim determination. Humans have an additional response that we had never documented before. They call it dark humor. Dark humor, he explained, was a coping mechanism that allowed humans to face impossible situations by finding absurdity in them. Rather than being overwhelmed by the horror of combat, humans seemed to process it through laughter. It was not that they did not feel fear. They felt it deeply, but they refused to let it control them. Imagine being able to look at your own death and find it amusing, Essender said. Imagine being able to transform terror into energy. That is what humans do. It is perhaps the most terrifying adaptation we have ever encountered. A former Kolvani soldier named Dexmar had a different perspective. He had served alongside humans after his people joined the coalition forces against the Void Swarm, an extragalactic threat that nearly destroyed half the known civilizations. I watched them closely, Dexmar said in his interview. I wanted to understand them. I thought perhaps if I learned their secret, I could become a better warrior myself. What he learned changed his understanding of humanity forever. During the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, his mixed unit was pinned down by swarm forces for 6 consecutive days. Ammunition was scarce. Food was running out. Several soldiers from various species had begun to lose hope. The Kolvani were preparing their death rituals. The Veshans were entering battle rage, which usually ended in suicidal charges. The humans gathered everyone together and started telling stories. They called them war stories, Dexmar recalled. Tales of past battles, past struggles, past mistakes. But they told them in a way that made everyone laugh. They turned tragedy into comedy. They transformed fear into community. By the end of the third night, the alien soldiers were attempting to share their own stories in the human style. A Veshan warrior spoke of a battle where her commander fell into a waste disposal unit mid-charge. A Kolvani pilot described accidentally firing on his own ship during a training exercise. The stories were not funny by any normal standard, but the humans laughed anyway, and somehow that made everyone else laugh too. They taught us that laughter was a weapon, Dexmar said. The swarm could take our supplies. They could wound our bodies. They could kill our friends. But they could not take our ability to laugh. And as long as we could laugh, we were not defeated. The coalition forces held that position for 12 more days until reinforcements arrived. When rescue ships finally landed, they found soldiers of 5 different species sitting together, sharing jokes and laughing despite their wounds and losses. The war correspondents who documented the human involvement in the Galactic War often struggled to convey what they witnessed. One Dravak journalist named Marisol wrote extensively about a particular incident that haunted her thoughts for years afterward. She was embedded with a human marine unit during the liberation of the colony world Horizon's Edge. The fighting was brutal, with swarm forces outnumbering the human troops 3-1. During one particularly intense firefight, a human sergeant named Rodriguez was struck by enemy fire and lost his left arm below the elbow. Marisol expected screaming. She expected panic. She expected the psychological breakdown that would occur in any other species facing such catastrophic injury. Instead, Rodriguez looked at his missing arm, looked at his squad mates and said, "Well, there goes my bowling career." The other humans burst into laughter. They were still taking fire. They were still in mortal danger. And they were laughing at a joke about a missing limb. That was the moment I understood. Marisol wrote in her memoir, "Humans do not laugh despite the horror. They laugh because of it. The laughter is how they survive. It is how they keep fighting when any other species would surrender or die. It is their most powerful adaptation, more devastating than any weapon they have ever created. After the war, many alien veterans struggled to readjust to civilian life. The memories of those laughing human warriors haunted their dreams. Some sought therapy. Others wrote books trying to explain what they had experienced. A few even tried to adopt the human practice of dark humor themselves, with varying degrees of success. Commander Vexrath eventually became an instructor at the Corvani Military Academy. He taught young officers about human combat psychology, trying to prepare them for something he himself had never been prepared for. If you ever face humans in battle, he would tell his students, and you hear them laughing, do not assume they have gone mad. Do not assume they have given up. That laughter means they are at their most dangerous. It means they have found something within themselves that we do not possess. It means they have already decided they will not be broken. His students always ask the same question. How do you fight an enemy who laughs at death? Vexrath never had a good answer. The galactic community eventually signed lasting peace treaties with humanity. The humans proved to be generous in victory, forming alliances and sharing technology freely. They were not the monsters that some propaganda had painted them to be. They were curious, creative, and surprisingly kind. But every alien who had faced them in combat carried the same memory. The sound of human laughter in the middle of a firefight. The sight of soldiers cracking jokes while the world burned around them. The absolute refusal to let fear have the final word. In the end, it was not human strength or technology that made them the most formidable species in the galaxy. It was their ability to find joy in the darkest moments. It was their capacity to transform suffering into absurdity and absurdity into strength. The veterans who told these stories never forgot that lesson, and they made sure the rest of the galaxy would remember it too. Some things in the universe cannot be explained by science or military strategy. Some things can only be witnessed and wondered at. Human laughter in the face of death was one of those things. And for those who had heard it, the sound would echo in their minds forever.